They left 700 warped barrel staves at the Cooperage. She turned them into a waiting list. They called it scrap. She called it a start. 700 barrel staves. Every one of them warped beyond spec, rejected by the grading chain, stacked under a rusted overhang at the back of the Halloran Cooperage property, like the building itself was trying to forget them. The county waste contractor had been out twice. Quoted $2,400 to haul the whole pile off. The Halloran sons looked at the quote, looked at each other, and left the pile where it was. She had $340 in her checking account and a dead grandfather's notebooks. Have you ever looked at something the entire world told you was worthless and realized, really realized, down in your gut, that the world was wrong? Nora Vass backs her grandfather's F-250 through the service gate of the Halloran Cooperage at 6:15 on a Thursday morning in March 1997, and there is nobody on the property but a property manager named Dale, who has already decided he does not want to be there. The truck idles. The heater fan clicks. The air outside smells like frozen mud and old oak and something underneath. Something sweet and dense and almost floral that she won't understand until she runs the first test. She steps out. The gravel is still hard with overnight frost, and her boots, brown leather, worn through the toe box on the right, resoled twice, crunch down into it and hold. She is 23 years old. Dark hair pulled in a braid over her left shoulder, wisps loose at the temples from the drive. Faded olive canvas jacket, the original lining replaced with wool flannel 6 years ago. Jeans worn pale at the knees, freckles across the bridge of her nose, already flushed copper from the cold. Clipped to her right jacket pocket, a brass-cased pocket caliper, worn smooth at the thumb wheel, the kind her grandfather used to measure stave thickness and Cooperage tolerances for 40 years before he measured anything else. She inherited it along with the notebooks, the Ford, and $22,800 in equipment loans that were due in 90 days. Dale meets her at the gate with a styrofoam coffee cup and a form on a clipboard, and says the staves have to be removed at the buyer's expense. She nods. She already knows this. She signed for it last week for $800 total, all 700 staves, as is, the Cooperage's liability released upon pickup. Dale says she's going to need a bigger truck. She says, rented one for tomorrow. She walks to the pile without looking back at him. He goes inside. Here is what she sees. The staves are red oak, Quercus rubra, each one roughly 30 inches long, sawn at Cooperage thickness, which runs between 3/4 and 1 1/4 depending on the barrel diameter they were cut for. The warp on these ranges from mild to severe. The mild ones have a gentle cup across the face, 3 to 5 millimeters of deviation over the 30-inch length. The severe ones have twisted a full 1/4 inch off the baseline, end to end. In the months they sat under that overhang, absorbing uneven moisture from a leaking roof on one side and dry winter air from the open east end on the other. That's what caused it. Not bad wood. Not defective cells. Just moisture differential applied over time to wood that hadn't been properly stickered. She already knew this from the notebooks, but knowing it and seeing it are two different things. She runs the caliper. Mild warp on the first one she picks up. She sets it down in a separate pile. Moderate on the next. She sets it with the first. She goes through 40 staves in the first half hour, sorting as she goes, and by the time the sun clears the tree line and the frost starts to go muddy, the proportions are clear. 220 pieces with warp under 4 memmer, workable with hand tools and humidity correction, and another 480 that range from challenging to severe. She pulls out the small green hardcover notebook her grandfather carried in the breast pocket of his shop coat for 19 years. The cover is faded to the color of old sage. The binding is reinforced with electrician's tape. The pages have gone soft as flannel at the corners from 40 years of handling in winter shops. She reads the line she's been carrying in her head for 6 weeks. Warped wood is not ruined wood. Warped wood is wood that was not listened to. She needs to understand what she has before she can decide what to build. This is where the notebooks become the map. Her grandfather, Vernon Vass, 6'2", who wore the same gray wool vest from October to April every year of his adult life and kept a stub of white chalk in his left front pocket at all times, spent 38 years as a Cooperage consultant and cabinet restorer in this county before a stroke took him the previous August. He had worked with red oak his entire career. He understood, at a molecular level, what most people working wood understood only by instinct. Here is what the notebooks say about warped red oak, and here is why it matters for this story. Red oak is a ring-porous wood. Under a microscope, the early wood, the wood grown in spring, has large open pores that form distinct rings. These pores are part of a hydraulic system the living tree used to move water. When red oak is sawn and the moisture content changes unevenly, one face drying faster than the other, one end faster than the middle, the wood moves. It cups. It bows. It twists. This is not failure. This is the wood responding to physics in the most straightforward way possible. The staves at Halloran had been stacked on edge in open air, with a roof leak creating a permanent moisture gradient from northeast to southwest. The warp was completely predictable. What most people do not understand, what the Cooperage industry had written off as unrecoverable, is that warp caused by moisture differential is, under the right conditions, reversible, not completely, and not for all pieces. But wood that warped from external conditions can be partially restored and stabilized through controlled remoistening and constraint drying, a process Vernon Vass had refined over 30 years of shop work and documented in detail across 3 notebooks. The process runs as follows. The piece is laid flat in a humidity chamber, in practice, a sealed room with a humidifier, at 80 to 85% relative humidity, for a period of 48 to 72 hours depending on stave thickness. The wood absorbs moisture evenly across both faces. As it does, the internal tension that created the warp begins to equalize. Then the stave is removed, placed between 2 flat cauls, heavy flat boards used as clamps, and clamped under 200 to 400 pounds of pressure using bar clamps, 4 to 6 of them per stave. It stays clamped for another 48 hours while the moisture content drops back to equilibrium. In this county, that's around 8 to 9%. When the clamps come off, the warp is reduced. In mild cases, eliminated. In moderate cases, brought within tolerance for hand planing. In severe cases, reduced enough that the piece becomes usable for a different application than its original one. This is the blueprint Vernon Vass wrote down. Not as a theory. As a procedure with specific numbers, 82% RH, 60 hours, 300 pounds distributed across 5 clamps, joint caul length minimum 28 inches. He had done this to hundreds of pieces of furniture and millwork over 38 years. He had never done it to 700 barrel staves at once. But the physics was the same. Nora reads the numbers. She reads them again. Then she closes the notebook and goes back to sorting. She rents a 26-foot box truck for 2 days. She and her cousin Marcus load 700 staves in 9 hours. They haul the load to her grandfather's shop, a 60 by 40 post-frame building outside Landers Creek with a concrete floor, a wood stove, and 2 dehumidifiers that run continuously from November to April. Because her grandfather understood that a shop that doesn't control moisture is not a shop, it's a barn with ambitions. The foreman from Halloran drives past the Cooperage gate on his way home that Tuesday afternoon and sees the overhang is empty. He calls his brother. His brother calls Dale. Dale says she got it all out in 2 days, just her and some kid, and she paid for it herself and said thank you on the way out. The foreman's brother tells the foreman she must not know what she bought. The foreman says either that, or she does. Neither of them does anything with that thought. Nora spends the first 2 weeks setting up the humidity chamber. She sections off one corner of the shop with plastic sheeting stapled to 2x4 framing and seals the seams with tape. She installs 2 humidifiers. She buys a data logger for $140 that records temperature and humidity every 15 minutes and stores 2,000 readings. She stacks the first batch, 40 staves from the mild warp group, on edge on stickered 2x4 sleepers inside the chamber with 1-inch gaps between each piece. She gets the chamber to 82% RH and closes it. She waits 60 hours. She does not open it early. Her grandfather's notes say, "The most common error in controlled remoistening is impatience. You are not observing the process. You are allowing the process. There is a difference." On the 61st hour, she opens the chamber. The wood smells like a wet forest in summer, sweet and living in a way that dried staves do not. She picks up the first piece. It is noticeably heavier than when it went in. The warp, she measured it at 3.2 mm before it went in, is reduced. She gets the caliper and checks, 0.8 mm. She sets up the calls. She clamps it. She writes the number in a fresh notebook in the same cramped, hard-pressed hand her grandfather used, because she has been practicing his hand since she was 12, and she does not know whether that is strange. She clamps all 40 pieces, and she goes home. Have you ever had a whole room full of work go quiet when you finally understand what to do with it? The man arrives on a Tuesday morning in late April. He drives a charcoal Volvo, clean enough that it looks alarming in the gravel lot outside her grandfather's shop. He gets out in an olive gray suit jacket with no tie, black Oxford shoes already going white at the toe from the gravel. He carries a brushed aluminum clipboard pressed flat against his chest. His hair is sandy, thinning, combed back from a wide forehead. He has rimless rectangular glasses with thin metal arms and a patient little smile that sits on his face the way a sign sits on a fence post, there because someone put it there, not because anything is growing beneath it. He rocks slightly heel to toe while he walks. His name is Gerald Foss. He represents a regional property management group that had been circling the Halloran Cooperage site for 2 years, and somewhere in his research he had found the transfer paperwork for the stave lot. He finds Nora at the shop bench running a smoothing plane across a clamped stave. She does not stop when he comes in. He introduces himself. She nods. He looks around the shop, the humidity chamber, the stickered stacks, the bars of clamps along the south wall, and his chin lifts slightly. He says he represents a buyer interested in reclaimed oak material for a boutique flooring project. He says he's done some research on this type of rejected Cooperage stock. He says, and he says it kindly, the way a man says something when he has already decided on the outcome. Your grandfather worked with this material for years and, no disrespect, never found a scalable application. You're 23. You've got maybe 300 pieces you can surface and maybe 200 you can't, and you've got 90 days before your equipment note comes due. I can take all of it, as is, no grade, your haul, for $4 a piece. That is $2,800. Her equipment note is $22,800. She sets down the plane. She looks at him. The freckles across the bridge of her nose are bright copper in the shop light. She says, "Not for sale." He waits. He is good at waiting. He has learned that people fill silence with better offers to themselves. She picks up the plane and goes back to work. He writes something on his clipboard. He tells her his card is on the bench and to call when she changes her mind. She does not look up. He walks out. His shoes crunch in the gravel, and then the Volvo starts and pulls away. She puts the plane down. She picks up the notebook. She reads the line. Warped wood is not ruined wood. Warped wood is wood that was not listened to. She goes back to work. The first failure comes in week 3. She moves the severe warp batch, 480 staves, into the chamber at the same settings. 82% RH. 60 hours. She pulls the first 20 out and clamps them. When she uncouples the clamps 48 hours later, 11 of the 20 have not held. The warp is back. Not to the original measurement, but close. down from 9 mm to 7 mm, still far outside usable tolerance for fine surface work. She stands in the cold shop holding the first piece with both hands, turning it under the shop light. The warp came back because the moisture content on the severe pieces is not equalizing correctly. The inner wood is still drier than the face, and when the clamps release, the tension differential pulls it back. She has lost 3 weeks of chamber time on 480 pieces, and her humidity log, she checks it twice, shows the chamber performed exactly as specified. The wood is not wrong. The process is wrong. She sits on the floor of the shop with the failed stave across her knees for 11 minutes. That is the whole of it. Then she gets the notebooks. Her grandfather addressed this. Not this exact situation, but adjacent to it. Dense poured ring porous species with elevated tension wood in the reaction zone need longer equalization time and lower initial humidity to prevent surface case hardening, a condition where the outer face of the wood stabilizes while the core is still in flux, creating a hardened shell over a moving interior. You can't feel case hardening with your hands. You can't see it. You'll see it when the clamps come off and the piece springs back. The fix is counterintuitive. Reduce the initial humidity to 70%, extend the soak to 96 hours, and add a 24-hour intermediate stage at 75% RH before moving to clamps. The process is longer, but the result is stable because the core and the face move together instead of one chasing the other. She breaks down the chamber, resets it. 70% RH. She loads 20 staves. She waits 96 hours. She does not open it early. A man named Walt Pritchard farms 200 acres of hay ground 2 properties over. He is 58 years old and has driven past this shop his entire adult life, first with Vernon Vass's truck parked out front, and now with Nora's. He stops at the gate on a Saturday morning in May with a chipped white enamel mug in one hand and his arms crossed high when she comes out to check on him. He says he heard she bought the scrap from Halloran. She says she did. He says his understanding is that wood's all but worthless. She says, that's one understanding. He looks at the shop. He looks at the truck. He looks at her jacket, which is the same jacket he saw on her grandfather for 20 years. He does the math on what she probably paid for the lot and what she probably had in her account, and his face does something complicated. He nods once. He drives away. He does not say anything encouraging, and she does not need him to. Have you ever had someone show up at your gate just to see if you'd quit yet, and you hadn't? The corrected process works. When she uncouples the first corrected batch, all 18 of the 20 viable pieces hold. The 2 that don't are the 2 with the most severe reaction wood twist, pieces the notebooks flagged as unlikely. She sets those aside. The 18 hold flat within 1.2 mm. Hand plane tolerance on the wide face is 2 mm. They're in. She runs all 480 severe warp staves through the corrected process over 6 weeks, working in batches of 20. She is in the shop at 5 am and out after dark most nights. The results by batch vary. The worst 80 pieces don't come within tolerance, and she sets them aside entirely. Of the 400 remaining, 310 come through flat enough for face work. The other 90 are still slightly bowed, 2 to 4 mm, and she planed them to a slightly thinner profile and sets them in a separate stack. She will figure out what those are for later. By the 3rd week of June, the math is this: 220 mild warp pieces at full tolerance, 310 severe warp pieces at full tolerance, 90 mid-warp pieces at reduced profile. That is 530 pieces of usable red oak, reclaimed from 700 pieces the county was going to charge $2,400 to haul to a landfill. The cost to get here, $800 for the lot, $140 for the data logger, $280 in humidifier supplies, 6 weeks of propane for the shop stove, and her time. She has not paid herself anything. She has not paid anything toward the equipment note. She has 44 days left. She sits at the kitchen table at 10:45 at night. The shop is cold and locked. The kitchen smells like wood ash and instant coffee, and the faint sweet oak smell that has settled into her clothes, and she no longer notices. On one side of the table, the equipment loan notice. $22,800 due in 44 days. On the other side, a yellow legal pad where she has been writing potential applications for the reclaimed stock. Cutting boards, small furniture, edge banding for custom cabinetry, floor samples, and one she keeps coming back to. One she has not been able to price out yet, because she does not know if there is a market for it. Because the market for it did not exist in any form she can find in 1997, which either means she is wrong about the product or she is early. The product, Cooperage grade red oak barrel stave panels. Precision surface to 3/4-inch finished, glued up in random length arrangements on edge, the way the stave was originally oriented, so the quarter-sawn face shows. The quarter-sawn face of red oak shows the medullary rays, the silver-gold fleck pattern that runs perpendicular to the annual rings, visible only when the wood is properly oriented. It is the most distinctive surface in red oak. It is the surface that makes the wood look like something. And in a Cooperage stave, cut to Cooperage specification and grain oriented for barrel use, you get it automatically. Every piece. That is the thing the Cooperage industry had never thought to market, because Cooperages make barrels, not panels, and to them the grain orientation was a structural specification, not an aesthetic one. Her grandfather's notebooks contain the sentence, "The quarter-sawn face was always there." The barrel hit it. She picks up the pen. She does not sign the equipment notice. She puts the pen down. She gets up and walks out to the shop in the cold. She opens the building. The smell of the oak comes out at her, dense and sweet and ancient, and she turns on the single fluorescent tube over the bench and stands in front of the first finished panel she glued up 2 days ago. 14 inches wide, 30 inches long, 3 staves on edge, the silver gold ray fleck running the whole face. She runs her hand across it. Then she goes back inside, and she goes to bed, and in the morning she goes back to work. The Foss man comes back in July. He has heard, from someone, she doesn't know who, that the processing is finished. His offer is now $6 a piece for whatever she can grade. He says this is a significant improvement over his first number. He says the market for reclaimed oak has softened since spring. He says he has 3 other Cooperage sources in rotation, and he's doing her a favor by coming back. She is at the table saw when he comes in. She does not turn it off. She waits until the cut is done. She sets down the piece. She looks at him. She says, same answer. He does something with his clipboard, adjusting his grip, pressing it a little flatter to his chest. He says he'll be in the area through August, and she should feel free to reach out. She nods. He leaves. She does not watch him go. She needs a market. She does not have one. What she has is 530 panels of finished quarter-sawn red oak, stacked on edge in a shop outside Landers Creek, and 14 days before the equipment note is due. She builds a display. She loads 12 panels into the truck and drives to a kitchen and bath showroom in the county seat run by a woman named Helen Bauer, who has a reputation for knowing what will sell before anyone else does, and for having no patience for people who waste her time. Helen is 61 years old. She has a jeweler's loop on a cord around her neck that she uses to check finish quality on samples brought in by vendors. She uses it on Nora's panel before she says a word. She looks up. She says, "What's the lead time?" Nora says, "On what quantity?" Helen says she wants to see if she can move 20 panels in 90 days on consignment at $180 per panel. If they move, she wants a standing order. 20 panels at $180 is $3,600. The consignment split is 30%. That's $2,520 to Nora. Not enough for the equipment note, but enough to understand what is possible. The 20 panels sell in 31 days. Nora gets the call on a Wednesday morning while she is running the third corrected batch through the chamber. Helen says she has 11 customers waiting and 2 designers who called asking for more. She wants to know the price on 50 panels, firm, not consignment. Nora says she'll call her back by Thursday. She does the math at the kitchen table that night. Finished panel cost, materials, equipment prorated. Her time at a number she chooses by working backward from the note puts her floor price at $110 per panel. Helen sold them at $180. If she sells direct to designers at $150, that's a margin that works. If Helen takes 50 at $135 wholesale, that also works. She calls Helen on Thursday. Helen takes 50 at $130, wants them in 6 weeks. Have you ever had the math go from wrong to right while you were in the middle of not giving up? By September, she has paid the equipment note in full, with $4,200 left over. By November, she has a second standing order. This one from an architectural millwork firm in the next county that is specifying the panels for a hotel renovation. By February of the following year, Walt Pritchard shows up at the gate again. Same mug, same crossed arms, same silence. He asks, and she can tell he has been composing this question the whole drive over. He asks what the minimum order is. She asks what he's building. He says a bar top for the bunkhouse. His wife has been after him about it for 15 years, and he figures he's out of excuses. She tells him the minimum is 4 panels. She tells him the price. He does not flinch. She asks if he wants to see the current stock. He says he does. She takes him inside. He looks at the panels for a long time without touching them, the mug held at his side. Then he reaches out and runs one finger along the silver-gold ray fleck, the same gesture Helen Bauer made with her loop, the same gesture every person makes when they see the surface for the first time. He says, "Your grandfather would have figured it out eventually." She says, "He did figure it out. I'm just executing it." Walt goes quiet for a moment. He nods once in a way that costs him something. He says he'd like 6 panels. That is the whole apology. Men like Walt don't say sorry. They ask for 6 panels with their hat in their hands. By the time the Foss man calls, in late October, from a blocked number, to ask if she might be open to a licensing conversation, she has a waiting list of 22 customers and a second shop employee, a 19-year-old named Marcus Pruitt, who is Vernon Vass's great-nephew and has his same instinct for grain. She does not return the call. It is not dramatic. She simply does not return it, and after 3 weeks it stops coming. He was not beaten. He was just left standing there, holding an offer nobody needed. 21 years pass the way oak dries in a well-run shop. Slow, deliberate, exactly as designed. Nora Vass is 44 years old. Her hair is still in a braid over her left shoulder, dark brown with silver running through it now, like the ray fleck in quarter-sawn oak. The freckles have deepened on the bridge of her nose. The olive canvas jacket is on its 4th replacement, same style, same wool flannel lining, because she found a supplier in 1998 and has ordered the same jacket every few years since. The brass-cased pocket caliper is still clipped to her right jacket pocket. The thumb wheel is smooth where her grandfather wore it smooth and smooth again where she has. The shop is now 4 buildings on 6 acres. She employs 11 people. The waiting list is currently 38 customers, window treatment designers, furniture makers, a boat builder in Oregon, 2 kitchen architects who have used nothing else for a decade. She processes between 900 and 1,200 panel faces per year. She sources from 3 cooperages in 2 states, all of which have designated reject lots that go to her by standing agreement. The material arrives warped and rejected, and leaves as something people wait a year to own. On a Thursday morning in October, a truck with mud still in the wheel wells pulls through the gate. The driver is 22 years old. Her name is Sarah. She has been reading about the operation for 2 years, drove 4 hours this morning, and has brought a sketchbook full of questions that she has been too nervous to ask in the email she kept drafting and deleting. She has a particular question about the corrected process, the 70% RH protocol, why 96 hours instead of 72, whether the intermediate stage is strictly necessary or just conservative. It is the exact right question. Nora knows this because it is the question she asked the notebooks in 2003 when she was trying to shorten the cycle time. And the answer the notebooks gave her, and that she has since confirmed empirically, is that the intermediate stage is not conservative. It is structural. Skipping it saves 24 hours and costs you 20% of your output, which compounds over a year into a math problem nobody wins. She shows Sarah through the shop. The humidity chambers, 3 of them now, purpose-built. The clamping tables, the planer and the glue-up station, and the finishing room where the panels are sanded to 220 and oiled with a tung oil blend her grandfather developed and she has never changed. She shows her the notebook. Not all of it. The relevant pages. Sarah reads them with the same stillness Nora brought to the kitchen table in 1997. The stillness of someone who has been waiting a long time to understand something they already believed. Then Nora unclips the caliper from her right jacket pocket. She turns it over once in her palm, the brass warm from her body heat, the thumb wheel worn smooth in the exact shape of her grandfather's thumb and her own. She holds it out. Sarah looks at it for a moment and then takes it. Her hand closes around it the way hands close around things that were made to be held. Then the notebook. She sets it on the bench beside Sarah's hand. She says, "The process is in there. The intermediate stage is not optional. Don't let anyone talk you into skipping it." Sarah says, "I won't." Nora nods. She walks out to check the south stack, hands loose at her sides, and leaves her to it. Look around your own place sometime. The pile in the back corner. The stack under the overhang. The material everyone says is too far gone to bother with. The offer you've been looking at for 6 weeks, wondering if taking it means you're being practical, or if it means you're being the person who didn't know what they had. Somewhere near you right now, there's a cooperage, a mill, a dealer, a county lot where somebody has written off a pile of material that went wrong in some specific, reversible, understandable way, and priced it like it went wrong forever. Because they do not have the notebooks, and you might. Wood is not the only thing that warps from uneven listening. Go look at it.